Between October 1939 and May 1940, there was little military action on the Western Front. Both Germany and France were waiting in their fortifications while making plans for future operations. In this period of inactivity, the High Command of the German Army devised several different plans for the invasion of France. The plan that was finally approved was devised by Lieutenant General Erich von Manstein. The plan was a two-pronged attack with Army Group B invading Belgium and Holland, and Army Group A invading France through the Ardennes forest. After 29 postponements, the invasion commenced on the 10th of May 1940. The invasions in Belgium and Holland went according to plan. The Allied First Army Group, under the command of General Gaston Billow, responded according to the Allied Dial Plan and advanced to the Dial River in order to form a solid front line behind this natural obstacle. However, the offensive by Army Group B was a diversion. The main thrust was to be conducted by Army Group A through the Ardennes forest in Luxembourg and southern Belgium. This area was lightly defended, as the Allies were certain such terrain could not be crossed by tanks. The attack through the Ardennes was assigned to 4 panzer corps, with the town of Sedan being the main point of effort. The French defenses in this sector were weak and neglected. The 2 infantry divisions under General Gransard were Category B divisions containing reservists. By nightfall on the 12th of May, Guderian's 19th Panzer Corps approached Sedan unopposed. There was no sign of French troops. In the early hours on the 13th of May, the 3 panzer divisions began taking their positions to strike at the designated crossing points. At the center of Sedan's tactical front, the 1st Panzer Division was directed towards Golière. The 10th Panzer Division was to cross near Wadlincourt. Meanwhile, the 2nd Panzer Division was to cross the river at Donchery, but was delayed in the traffic through the Ardennes forest. Along the eastern bank of the Meuse, the French army had built fortifications which were covered by a large bunker complex located on the Marfy Heights. Guderian's main problem was inadequate artillery support. Because of the traffic in the Ardennes forest, several batteries were left behind and the divisional artillery units could not cover the entire area. The 2nd and 10th Panzer Divisions were stripped of their artillery, which was relocated opposite of Golière to support the 1st Panzer Division. The success of the attack depended on the support of the Air Force, and Guderian could call upon 1,470 aircraft from the 3rd Air Fleet. This was a massive concentration of air power for such a narrow sector. The planned air assault commenced on the 13th of May at 8 a.m. and lasted for 8 hours. The primary targets were the fortified artillery positions on the Marfy Heights. Although none of the bunkers were completely destroyed, the bombardment broke the French soldiers psychologically, and the gunners deserted their positions before the German ground assault began. The 55th Division suffered 56 casualties. For the Luftwaffe, the cost was 6 aircraft, 3 of which were Stuka dive bombers. Guderian ordered his troops to attack, although the 2nd Panzer Division was still on the way. For the assault at Golière, the Großdeutschland Regiment and a battalion of assault engineers were attached to the 1st Panzer Division. The infantry discovered that the Luftwaffe failed to destroy the bunkers, and the French machine gunners caused heavy casualties to the first waves of boats crossing the river. The Germans brought forward 2 flak 88mm guns to destroy the bunkers that prevented the crossings. The Großdeutschland Regiment finally established a small bridgehead, and the 1st Rifle Regiment crossed to reinforce and widen it. The Germans then moved along the bank, clearing French bunkers on the way. At Wadlincourt, the 10th Panzer Division had less luck. The majority of artillery and machine gun positions of the 71st Division were not raided by the Luftwaffe that morning. As the infantry regiments of the division were preparing their boats, they received an artillery barrage that destroyed 81 out of 96 rubber boats. Eventually, only a small 11-man team of 6 infantrymen and 5 engineers managed to cross the river. Leading this team was Sergeant Walter Rubarth, who led his men against the French fortifications and destroyed several bunkers. Thanks to his heroic action, a decisive breach was opened, and by nightfall, the rest of the infantry had crossed and established a bridgehead. Rubarth himself described the events later. The rubber boat moves across the water. During the crossing, constant firing from our machine guns batter the enemy, and thus not one casualty occurs. I land with my rubber boat near a strong, small bunker, and together with Lance Corporal Podzis, put it out of action. We attack the next bunker from the rear. I throw an explosive charge. In a moment, the force of detonation tears off the rear part of the bunker. We use the opportunity and attack the occupants with hand grenades. After a short fight, a white flag appears. For his achievements, Walter Rubarth was later awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. Meanwhile, at Donchery, the 2nd Panzer Division finally reached the sector. Because the 19th Panzer Corps' offensive had already started by the 2 leading divisions, the French garrisons west of Sedan were already on alert. As the 2nd Panzer Division was approaching the river on open terrain, the French subjected the Germans to intensive artillery fire, which made it impossible to cross the river. It was up to the 1st Panzer Division to clear the way. The 1st Rifle Regiment could already see the tanks of the 2nd Panzer Division and continued clearing the bunkers until nightfall. The 1st Infantry units of 2nd Panzer crossed at 10 p.m. The Germans had now 3 bridgeheads established, but they were vulnerable to counterattacks as they were constructing pontoon bridges for their tanks. Among the ranks of the 55th Division, rumors spread that German tanks were approaching Bulsen. At about 7 p.m., a French artillery observer passed on false reports based on these rumors, and the men of the 55th Division fled in panic, leaving their heavy equipment behind. On May 14th, early in the morning, General Gronsard called for his reserves to launch a counterattack while Germans were still vulnerable. The 2 infantry regiments, supported by 2 tank battalions, were ordered to strike at the Schaheri-Bulsen axis at 4 a.m. The counterattack was delayed for 2.5 hours because of hesitation of the French commanders, fleeing civilians who crowded the roads, and more false intelligence reporting German tanks at Chaumont. This grotesque miscommunication gave the Germans enough time to finish their bridge at Sedan, and by 7 a.m., a large number of tanks, as well as anti-tank guns, had already crossed the Meuse and began moving inland. Eventually, only the 7th Tank Battalion and the 213th Infantry Regiment carried out the counterattack. The French infantry was soon pinned down by machine gun fire, and the tanks pressed the attack alone. German engineers found it easy to attack the unescorted tanks by throwing explosive charges on their treads. In this battle, the French lost 30 tanks, while the Germans lost 2 Pak-36 guns and 5 tanks. Meanwhile, 2 more French divisions arrived at the Sedan sector. It was the 3rd Armored Division and the 3rd Motorized Division. The German High Command wanted Guderian to wait for the infantry divisions to catch up. To Guderian, this was madness, as it would allow the French to recover and regain the initiative. He decided to ignore his superiors and ordered 2 of his panzer divisions to push for the Channel in conjunction with Rommel's 7th Panzer Division further north. It is true that Guderian was taking a great risk with this move, especially since he was aware of the French reinforcements south of Stonne. So he sent the Grossdeutschland Regiment to seize all of the high ground across Stonne, and the 10th Panzer Division was to reinforce the infantry once all of its tanks had crossed the river. At this critical moment, the commander of the French Second Army, General Hunziger, made a strategic mistake. He thought that Guderian's intention was to outflank the Maginot Line and encircle the French forces deployed there. To prevent this, he ordered the bulk of the Second Army to redeploy southeast, thus opening a corridor between the 2nd and 9th Armies that served as the Germans' true objective, which was to race toward the coast and encircle the Allied forces in Belgium. On the 15th of May, the French attacked at Stonne. The battle was fierce and lasted 3 days. The town itself changed hands 17 times, with the Germans suffering heavy casualties this time. During the night on the 16th of May, the German 6th Corps, consisting of the 24th and 16th Divisions, arrived at Stonne to relieve the Grossdeutschland Regiment. With the 6th Corps now supporting the defense, Stonne was captured and secured for the last time on May 17th. In this 3-day battle, the French lost 33 tanks and the Germans 24. The Grossdeutschland Regiment suffered 570 men killed or wounded. The French defeat at Sedan left the right flank of the Allied armies in Belgium unprotected. On the 20th of May, the fate of France was sealed when the first German units reached the Channel coast. Thank you for watching. If you want to keep up with our updates, please hit the subscribe button. And don't forget to check us on Patreon. If you're a huge fan of the channel, support the war effort by joining our patrons and help us produce more videos.